Gorgeous. So everyone's sitting beneath their picky. Very smart. Lots of planning happens, right? We don't just roll up. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to get the panellists to do is if you could just introduce yourself, your name, the kaupapa you're a part of, how you're attached to this event tonight, the truth about our youth. And we can start down the end, if that's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello.
Gorgeous.
Kia ora whānau. Wow, what a privilege. Ko maunga tani whā te maunga, ko awanui te awa, ko tai taukaro te wahiraue, ko kai taia te tūranga waiwai, ko Corina Thompson toku ingoa. My whānau from the far north, but I call Auckland home, specifically South Auckland, with a beautiful NGO called Pillars. And we support children and families who have parents in prison. I have the privilege of leading our youth advisory panel called Ngā Rangatira Moa Pōpō, as well as being a frontline practitioner on our mentoring program. I'm also a researcher and a youth advocate, and I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about action that we can all take in the transformative justice space. On a personal level, I've got a beautiful 2-year-old called Maya. It's my first night away from her tonight, everybody. Big milestone. And I do that with absolute pleasure because being here is so important. I see myself as a speaker box for our young people here tonight. Thanks for having me.
Gorgeous. Kia ora.
Salam. Magai wa dewasa Somalian gi mai diani go yer ani hoide I o nana bagokore te awakaringi magi imada ko ayo ko mataka te maunga ko te awakaringi te awa he uri aho no Somalia ko a dewasa whaurare toko ingoa no reira tēnā koutou katoa. First and foremost, I just want to give a shout out to Zeal. This organization has really cultivated me as a youth worker and has consistently been with me throughout my professional years as a youth worker, and I want to give credit when it's due, so thank yous first and foremost. And yeah, so what I do, I'm a youth worker, simple as, but yeah, and I just support young people to the best of my abilities and to support them the best that I can and enhance them wherever the enhancing is needed and to guide them and to be a voice that speaks life and light to them, because I know in this world it gets hard and it gets rough, and for me to have the gift of being able to break the ice with them straight away and to be able to journey with them and enhance them that's just amazing. And that's my gig and that's my passion, and that's a little bit of what I do. Sure.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Ko waiau, ko tāke, ko etare, ko te rangi, ko erehi, te whakapaparanga mai, ko te rangatipune, te whenua tapu, ko Messi, te kainga, ko Aaron Hendry, toko ingoa. So yeah, I identify as takata te tiriti. I've got a real mixed whakapapa, but I sort of feel connected most to Messi in West Auckland. So that's where I'm from. That's where I'm connected. I've got an amazing wife and 3 beautiful little boys that really ground me in my mahi that I do and are really supportive of the kaupapa. And my work really is around sort of youth homelessness. It's a real focus of mine. How do we sort of provide solutions for our young people? I lead a new organisation called Kickback, which is really focused on innovating in the gaps for our rangatahi and ensuring that we have the right services to really support our young people to be cared for in this space. So yeah, youth justice is a big part of this mahi, as it's a real key pipeline into homelessness for our rangatahi on both ends, and so that's why I'm passionate about it.
Tuatahi e mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe, te Aotearoa taranaki whānui ki te upoko o te ika me Ngāti Toa Rangatira. Tuarua, ka nui te mihi ki a tātou katoa e hui hui nei tēnei pō. Nā mihi mō tō tautoko o te kaupapa o te pō, mō te kaupapa i ngā wā katoa. Ko wai au, no airani ko te rana me Indonesia o Kutipuna, I whanua hau I te maro o te maunga o Waitakere, I tipo ake a hau I te kāinga o Teterangi, ko te whanganui a taro e noho ana, ko Claire Achmad tuku ingoa. I'm the Deputy Chief Children's Commissioner, and from the 1st of November, the incoming Chief Children's Commissioner. And my mahi is with our organisation, Mana Mokopuna, the Children and Young People's Commission. We came into being on the 1st of July this year, and we pick up the wero from previous children's commissioners who have been in place since for the last 30 years, and we build on their mahi. And I want to acknowledge our current Chief Children's Commissioner, Judge Evers, who couldn't be here this evening. Our mahi is to advocate for all of Aotearoa's children. We refer to them as mokopuna because they are all children. We are all children, we are all ancestors, but our children have particular rights that we are here to advocate on an independent basis. So I'm pleased to be here this evening and share the space in the kōrero. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. My name's Enys Delmage. I'm an adolescent forensic psychiatrist. I know that's not how you spell adolescent, by the way. I was in a rush and missed the So I spend most of my time in Pororua in the adolescent forensic inpatient service there. I also do some in-reach for Te Rere Tonga, youth justice residents in Palmerston North. I do some research and I'm also the very inept and inefficient chair of the Raise the Age campaign in New Zealand, which is seeking to raise the minimum age of criminal responsibility. Currently 10, for anyone that doesn't know. Yeah, that's me. Thank you very much.
Gorgeous. What a stunning panel we have for you tonight. I was just thinking, should we quickly flick back to the slide with the number, just so you can take it down in case you do think of a question mid-kōrero? Okay, I'll just give you a second with that number. Yeah, now the phones are going up. Unless people are just taking a moment to have a little check-in. Fair enough. Oh, camera, smart, efficient, an efficient audience. Yeah, I think we've just about done it. Oh, no, I see you there, and I'll wait for you, but I won't stare at you. Some late callers realising maybe they will want a question. That's okay. Gorgeous, the slide is going away so we can see everyone's beautiful faces again. Okay, I'm going to start tonight with our youth workers. So we've got Wasa and Aaron. What are the key concerns that you have as a youth worker, especially when it comes to young people engaging in harmful and risky behaviour like ram raids that is often missed out of the discourse in the media and in the public? So what do you think we're not hearing about those kinds of events? Let's start with you, Aaron.
Kia ora. Yeah, we could probably talk about this all night, couldn't we, brother? Yeah, I mean, our bro kind of spoke about it in his kōrero, and, you know, there's this big narrative around our young people, and you'd think that they're these huge monsters running around destroying the world, and we should all be terrified, but, you know, the reality is that these are our kids, and, you know, that's not a flippant comment. You know, I've sat down with young men, you know, boys that, yeah, have done some really harmful things in moments of extreme pain, but in the moment after, sat with them as they wept because of what they've done, because of the harm that they've caused, because of the harm they're experiencing, and seeing that deep, deep trauma and heartbreak and pain in their eyes. And in those moments, you know, it might be this like big 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old who looks like an adult, but he's actually just a child. And I think if we could get a sense of that and actually understand that the stuff you're seeing on the TV, you know, on repeat on the news, is a moment in time for that child, not who that child is. If we could see past that, if we could see past to the experiences that led that little one, that child, to that moment, we would start to understand and maybe have a bit more empathy, you know, the poverty, the abuse, the harm, the realization that that child first was a victim, that they first suffered, that actually in the midst of this they are continuing to suffer, both at times because of the state, but also because of the environment we've left them in. And I mentioned youth homelessness before. It is a huge piece of the puzzle and the context for a lot of these young people living in housing insecurity. Whānau who are moving from place to place, children who have never had a stable home, who tells you, look, we never know what stability looks like. We've always experienced homelessness. You know, if we could start to look more than this one moment and see the way that we've created a society that does not really honour and care for or love our children, we would start to understand why this is happening and why that child is in that moment causing harm. So, yeah.
Kia ora.
The concerns that someone like me gets whenever I hear a young person is going through hardships at home, and you hear what the media is saying when they have no relationship with these young people and they don't know what's going on at home, that's detrimental to them, especially when they see the media and they're consistently reminded that they're criminals. But when these young people should feel like citizens and not like criminals, they should feel free to walk around and get their needs provided for them. But when those needs are not being met, of course they're going to go vandalize and rob places because home is broken. So what happens is the domino effect of them finding a sense of belonging and identity within that crew. You know, they're fine with their friends, and then they do these things, and then which goes into people having this negative thought on these young broken people when they just need places to go to feel their nurture, to feel those words of encouragement and love. Because when you're with them each and every day, your heart is just broken for them, you know. And for me, and the concerns that I have is one day that it's all going to catch up to the rangatahi, you know. It's a thing where they can become oblivious to what they do but not know the repercussions as they get older in this world we live in. And for me and the youth workers that walk alongside them, you see successes, you know, you see those moments where they click, you know, but it's a journey, you know, it doesn't happen overnight, you know. You got to continue to cultivate the relationship you have with these young people and not give up on them when they get into vandalism or when they do ram raids, when they do these things. You got to have a heart of grace. And I think that's what the media lacks, because we're all going to fall, you know. And someone like me that came from a place of crime and whatnot, I had people that were speaking life into me, but when the world that I came from didn't. And those are the concerns that I have for my young people. But it's alleviated when I know that there's people out there that actually care, like everyone here. Sure.
Kia ora. I'm going to shift gears slightly now to you, Karina, who works at Pillars. We know you work directly with youth who are affected by parental incarceration. What's something that you see or hear about from youth as an advocate that is not often discussed in public arenas?
Kia ora, thank you, Janae. Yeah, the public arena at the moment, when it comes to youth, young people in general, in particular young people involved in justice, the discussion, the narratives that we're hearing are binary, they are divisive, and they are harmful. And what we're hearing is that there's apparently only two possible ways that we can respond to harm in our communities. We're either tough on it or we're soft on it. There is no in between, apparently. And what this means, the translation of that binary divisive approach, has real tangible harm on our young people in our communities. What we're not hearing is that by and large, all New Zealanders or most New Zealanders actually want the same things from our justice system. We all want safe and effective systems, and we all want thriving communities, but that's not the narrative that we're hearing every time we turn on the news. We're being pitched this idea that actually we are divided, when what really came through from our young people at Pillars, from my research, is that we have a lot in common. And if we could only find a way to connect with each other, to understand each other better, we could start to we've got all the evidence, we've got decades of evidence, as our Mātua said earlier. How is it that we can work together towards that shared horizon? Because what we're locked in now is inaction and ineffective justice policy. And for our young people at Pillars, we always say that the translation of that is that they end up serving an invisible sentence of their own. It's one of trauma, it's one of abuse, and it's one of intergenerational challenge. And when I asked our young people, what are the key messages that you want me to share with you, with the ropu tonight? Their messages boil down to one of choiceless choices. whether from whānau, whether from the community, or whether from the justice system itself. And they said to me, what that looks like, Karina, is from whānau, sometimes I have to choose between enduring abuse or having somewhere to live. I have to choose between having food or warmth. In the community, I have to choose between having support, perhaps through a counsellor or elsewhere, that is not culturally responsive, that is ineffective or re-traumatising, or choose to try and tough it out myself with nothing. And from the justice system, I have to choose between trying to walk on some kind of pathway to healing with my parent, or having that choice totally taken off me because of operational inefficacies within corrections. These choiceless choices over years end up driving young people into decisions that they make, and finally, from spending years being invisible, all of a sudden when I come into contact with police, all of a sudden all eyes are on me. And very often for our young people coming into the justice system, it's for the first time, listen to me, the world is looking at me now.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Dr. Achmad, we know you have a wealth of knowledge from both the domestic and international context. What are some interesting shifts that you are seeing in the international context that New Zealand might benefit from when it comes to youth and justice?
Kia ora, Janae. And I want to preface, I guess, my answer to your pātai with acknowledging that any approach that we take to youth justice and the issues that we're talking about tonight here in Aotearoa must be grounded in our particular unique context that we're in, and that means grounding our approaches in te tiriti o Waitangi. So that's the first thought that I just want to preface my whakaaro with. But I think the international context is really helpful for us to look at when it comes to this kaupapa, and I want to highlight, I guess, 3 key things to share with you this evening in that regard. The first one, I think, is that we can't lose sight of the international context. What's happening here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, when it comes to our mokopuna isn't something that's particularly unusual. If we look around the world, especially in other high-income developed countries, we actually see that, we've had an unprecedented last 4 years. We've had the pandemic. We've got a deepening climate emergency. We've got mental health pressures and crises happening in nations around the world, including here. And so we are seeing these particular behaviours, that we've been hearing a lot about here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They're not just happening here, they're also happening for youth around the world. And I think just picking up on, what Aaron and others have pointed to, when we see some of these behaviours manifesting, they are an indicator of underlying distress. And that is consistent in other countries around the world. So that's the first thing I wanted to highlight about the international context. The second thing, and why I think focusing and drawing our attention to this bigger picture, is because we have international standards and frameworks that Aotearoa New Zealand has signed up to, that any government of the day is obliged to implement these particular standards when it comes to our mokopuna. And so the first one is our UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Earlier this year, in February this year, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child issued a set of recommendations to the New Zealand government. It highlighted 8 urgent issues that it wanted to see our government make progress on. And youth justice was right up there as one of those 8 urgent issues. And within this recommendation, it highlights particular things that our government should be doing, including raising our minimum age of criminal responsibility to at least 14, regardless of offence. Also ensuring that we are moving to more community-based approaches for youth justice. And that when we are depriving children and young people of their liberty, that we are in line with international best practice and standards. So, for example, not age mixing children and adults in our youth justice and justice facilities. And then in July this year, the Committee Against Torture basically reinforced these recommendations from the Committee on the Rights of the Child, but also highlighted a few other things that I think are really important to be aware of, including ensuring that we make sure that we are taking a really equitable approach when it comes to our mokopuna Māori and ensuring that their rights are upheld. And of course, that has to be in line with Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And then the last thing, just briefly, when it comes to the international context, which I think is helpful, is that if we look around the world, there's actually some good practice that is emerging, some progressive practice. And my colleague, Dr. Nessa Lynch, has published a study last year where she highlights a few of these things. You know, she draws attention to the fact that some other countries have a minimum age of criminal responsibility that's already 16. In some countries, it's already 18. So it is possible. In a country like the United States, and I know it sounds a bit strange to refer to the US as a best practice example in this regard, but some particular states in the US are actually doing some quite exciting things. So California, for example, recently closed its last 3 youth justice facilities. New York State has been implementing an approach where it's moving from a prison-based response to youth justice to community-based response through its Close to Home initiative. So there's good examples that we can actually be looking to and be inspired from internationally.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Dr. Delmage, you are well researched when it comes to neurological development for adolescents. So I want to give you 3 words: window of opportunity. How might those words fit into the context of your work and some of the discourse we're hearing in the public domain?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I was just thinking about what I just heard, and Russia, not a country necessarily known for its record on human rights, they set the minimum age at 14. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So this is a great question about the windows of opportunity, and I suppose I see 2 very clear windows emerging through the scientific research that we've got. It's been a very interesting time to be a psychiatrist the past 20, 30 years. We've had a huge surge of neuroimaging and functional scanning and loads of very exciting things. So the 2 windows, the good news is they're fairly big windows. The first one is 0 to 5 or 0 to 3 if you're pessimistic. And bang for your buck, this is where to invest in children. So cheap as chips interventions like nurse family practitioners, these are wonderful people that do incredible mahi that's probably much more meaningful than anything I can do. Those are the sort of points of intervention that are really, really crucial. Triple P parenting programs, incredible years programs, those kind of things. They're really, really huge impact interventions. So again, rafts of research. Anyone that's interested out there, do grab me afterwards and I'll go through some of the references for you. But that's where to spend money in terms of neurodevelopment. That's when you're going to get most return for your taxpayers' dollar. The second window, which is more close to my heart, I suppose, is the 10 to 25 group. Now, that's an interesting time span to mention. There's a shift internationally to thinking about adolescence as a period which now might extend up to 25. Historically, most of us think of it kind of ending at 18. But the neuroimaging that we've got, there was a huge study in the US from the National Institute of Mental Health, which looked at frontal lobe development, those kind of things. Would strongly indicate that adolescence really should be characterised as something that goes up to about 25 for most neurotypical individuals. And just a caveat there, the sorts of rangatahi that end up in front of courts are not neurotypical. These are arguably children that have suffered degrees of brain damage through trauma, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, drug exposure, yada yada. So there's a window of opportunity there for that 10 to 25 year age group. And I think building on what some of my colleagues have said this evening, there's a branch of neurodevelopmental science called labeling theory. And this is about how we acquire a sense of identity through our teenage years. And if you like, the task of adolescence is to acquire a sense of identity, to understand who we are. Now, for the rangatahi that come into my unit, the sense of identity is, well, they're excluded from school. That tends to happen first of all. So they're violent, they're not getting on very well in lessons, they're bad influence, they're assaulting the teacher, so they get excluded from school. That's the first thing that happens. They go home, and in the whānau home setting, mum is trying to manage 5 other children. Dad is off doing whatever dad's doing, often drug and alcohol problems. That's very common with the rangatahi we work with in our unit. So they don't really have a firm sense of identity in the family home either. They're often kicked out of there. The pro-social children, of course, the pro-social parents of those children don't want them playing with those kids, so they don't really have a pro-social identity there. So every child has to be good at least one thing, and these poor rangatahi are out on the street thinking, well, who am I and what am I good at? I'm not good at school, I don't seem to be very good at home, I'm not good at acquiring pro-social friends. But there's a gang at the end of the street, and the gang says, well, listen, little Steve, maybe what you're good at is stealing cars. Maybe what you're good at is taking drugs across town for this gang. And so they start to get this sense of who they are through that process. Now, the danger for us as a society is that what we do is we reinforce that identity. So big piece of research in Edinburgh looking at outcomes from youth justice. And what that piece of research found is a massive study, it's still going on, it's been going on for about 20 years, is that even low-scale contact with the police, the likes of cautions, that kind of thing, has an increased effect on recidivism. So what it tells us then is that these children are being told, you are a young offender, you are, a ne'er-do-well, you are someone that's detrimental to society, and this starts to become their idea of, well, this is what I'm good at, and that's where they kind of gravitate. So that's a big danger. The question, of course, that I'm going to get from somebody is, well, what do we do about all this? And I've got 3 bids for you as an audience. 1, we raise the minimum age to 14 immediately. Now, that's going to have almost no impact at all. The number of children that are actually going through courts in that age group is very, very small. So, in fact, welfare and health services could mop that up with no problem. We're dealing with them already anyway. So that's step 1. The second is we create a defence of developmental immaturity. Given the neuroscience, given what we know, for the 14 to 18-year-olds, this is an additional defence. So instead of the process that we've currently got of introducing new offences for 12 and 13-year-olds, of ram raiding, horrific thing to do, or as the other side seems to be talking about, bringing back boot camps, we take a more nuanced and granular, neurodevelopmentally informed approach to the law. And of course, the third is, and this is going to hopefully garner a round of applause, we shut down the residences. And this is both youth justice and care and protection. I should just say that the views I've just expressed are mine and don't represent those of Te Whatu Ora.
Kia ora. And the views I share tonight represent me and everyone I've ever worked for. So we all think it. I am now going to move to the audience questions. So how this goes is I'll read it, and if it resonates with anyone in particular, feel free to start getting on your mic. And there are a few questions here that are for specific people as requested by the audience. And I will let you know now that for the last 10 minutes of this, you'll each get 2 minutes. It's like speed round, just to give the audience your key takeaway, or you can challenge them, or you can just give them bits of information, whatever you want. That 2 minutes is yours. But let's kick into some of your pātai. Here's the first one. Is it possible to respond effectively to the needs of children without also responding to the needs of their families? If yes, are there any examples of this working across our system?
Great question. Of course, straight away, any effective intervention with young people starts with whānau. By and large, usually, most often this is the case, but I am thinking of some of the young people that we work with. Sometimes the exception to the rule is when that's not possible, and when it is the young person who chooses for that not to be possible. In those cases, those are exception to the rule, but by and large, young people are part of a whānau, and a whānau-led approach is always the best place to start. Mm. Mm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, we often in our service, we've got a 10-bedded unit. It covers the whole of New Zealand. So in terms of thickening of the soup, the sorts of rangatahi we get are some of the more challenging ones, I guess. They've all got one or maybe 2 whānau members out there who are, positive and trying to be a good influence on their lives. And even where there isn't, I think, really we have to work with the whānau we've got and not the whānau that we wish we had. And so we make a great effort to try to reconnect the rangatahi with their whānau and the local iwi and build that connection. The reason is that as a service, you know, they can be detained under the Mental Health Act, right? They can be detained in youth justice residences, but eventually they'll get out of those places. And it's all very well me saying, well, I'd like you to go to this wonderful social services unit or this wonderful little NGO that will do great things for you. If it's not a secure unit, these kids will vote with their feet and they'll go back to whānau. So in a sense, what's the point of doing that? We know that that's going to happen anyway. So the much more sensible option, I think, is invest our energy in what is actually going to happen for these rangatahi. And of course, they'll gravitate back to whānau, even as we've said, if that's an abusive environment.
I'll just briefly add that for us at Mana Mokopuna, we're very clear that, you know, all of our mokopuna, they are in the context of their whānau, their hapu and iwi. That is where they thrive best in the majority of instances, and where there have been issues within a family and whānau, we have to work really hard to enable that connection to be restored and to be ongoing. And you know, in the work that we do, when I have had the privilege of sitting with mokopuna and hearing their stories, especially those who have been involved in our oranga tamariki system and our youth justice system, their clear message to us is always, actually, when it comes down to it, all I want is love and to experience that sense of belonging, because that's what grounds me. That's what helps me understand who I am and my identity. So we can't get away from the fact that we have to work with and see mokopuna in the context of their whānau hapu and iwi, and that is something that we are really staunch on at Mana Mokopuna and don't shy away from.
Yeah, sorry, just one quick add to that. I think about rangatahi that, you know, have had a long history of disconnection from whānau, and there's a lot of harm there, and so they can't be connected at this point in time. Often experiencing homelessness, don't have that stability. But there is sometimes this idea that we can work with them in isolation, and I guess that concept of whānau for some rangatahi is actually expanded. And so what I've seen is that actually working with a young person in isolation never works. But when we're talking whānau, it may not be blood, but there will be other young people that are their whānau, that they're doing life with on the street. There'll be other communities that they're attached to. And so that question, can we support young people in isolation? I would say no. Often our services, we're contracted in this way that we must, you know, you've just got these 5 young people, but that's never the way. And so we always have to be challenging ourselves to think, how do we ensure that we're providing support to that young person and the chosen whānau that they have around them? And if we don't do that, we're going to struggle to get in a successful intervention.
Kia ora. This question says, what do you think of ACT's proposed policy to change the law so 17-year-olds are dealt with in the adult justice system?
Do you want a symbol or?
I reckon, I honestly do. Yeah, do a symbol if you want across the panel.
I thought you were
I
going to
mean,
do
I do think
something
it's
else.
sort of a fast one. You've sort of all stated your views.
I mean, I think we heard from Dean earlier on with a very powerful message about punishment not being an effective shaping mechanism for behaviour, and I completely agree with that. I mean, again, these tamariki have been punished their whole lives, and it's never been contingent upon whether they've been good or bad or done nothing. They've been beaten, abused, the system's done the same to them. So yeah, to repeat that in any way, shape or form seems to me counterintuitive and very unhelpful for brain development.
Yeah, if we want more harm in the community, more young people going into prison, more young people going into the adult justice system and staying there longer, we should go with that policy.
Oh, after you.
I won't comment on the particular policy, but I'll bring it back to what the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child has said just in February this year. And they were explicit about this, that New Zealand should end the transfer of 17-year-olds to automatic trial by adult courts. They should be dealt with in the youth justice system.
Something that's come up for me in my research is around how shame is not and can never be an effective social justice tool. And like you, Claire, I won't comment on the policy itself, but what I would ask everyone in the room to think about is, why are there so many people perhaps not in this room, but elsewhere, who are supportive of such what feels like such a dangerous, an obviously dangerous and harmful policy. Where does that come from? Because it's not until we can hope to connect authentically with people who are supporting such harmful policies without shaming them that we can have conversations that are conducive to transformative change.
Kia ora.
I want to say something.
No, please.
I think it's a reaction to fear from them, and
100%.
these rangatai ain't gonna eat them. You know what I mean? It's like, it ain't that deep, bro. Like, just, you know, support the rangatahi, you know, like, put the putia where people can actually do what they do best and support rangatahi. You know what I mean? It's like, it's that simple. It isn't like, yeah, let's give them a harsh treatment. Let's send them away. Like, I got sent to Ethiopia when I was 8 because I was naughty. I came back, I was even naughtier. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, I feel like just, yeah, put the money where the support can best be used, and you'll see results in our future for our rangatahi. Sure.
Kia ora, we're going to stay with you because we have a question for you, if that's okay. As a youth worker, what does a small success look like, especially one that inspires both you and the young person from Nainai?
Yeah, no, all day. For me, I think it's in a small wins, because these young rangatahi come through broken and timid, and a massive win for me is to see them unlearn something negative. You know, if it was passed down generation, if it was passed down through trauma, if it was passed down through school, and for them to be like, you know what, I'm not gonna say what people say. I'm not going to do what people say I am or the negativity, but I'm going to walk with my own identity. That's a massive win for me. Like with Aotearoa Callaghan, I walked with him majority of his life. I knew when he was an intermediate, and I just kept cultivating the relationship. And one time he came up to me, he's like, bruv, I want to be a rapper. And I was like, whoa, mean. Let's see what we could do with it. And then we got hit with, shouts out to Aotearoa as well, gave us a fund to do Block Baby, which y'all seen. And for him to be like, you know what, he was never in front of a camera, and he went in front of a camera, and now he's like becoming a star in the hood. And that's a massive win to me, because he owned exactly what he was always meant to be, and his potential flourished in that space. So a massive win to me is that something simple, you know, a young person being punctual, or a young person just being themselves, you know, and getting out their shell. Like, those small things is a massive win to me. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Aaron, we've got a question. Do we need to get the media to change their approach to achieve the change we need?
Yeah, I think the way we're having the public discourse is not always helpful. And that framing, I mean, we heard it before, as if there's only these two solutions between sort of tough on crime and, you know, soft on crime. And I guess when I'm having kōrero with people in the community who maybe come from that real punitive perspective, but when you kind of pull them back and have a real balanced conversation around, hey, well, this is what that looks like, and here's the evidence there, but this is also what we're talking about, there's a lot of uptake. It's like, well, that makes sense, you know, because there's a huge myth around that soft on crime, what that looks like, and when we're framing restorative justice-based solutions that actually honour the voices of victims and provide solutions for healing and reconciliation as soft on crime, there's, of course, people aren't going to sort of listen to that. And so, reframing that conversation, I think, is really important. I would acknowledge that there has been a shift in the conversation within the media as well. So I'm starting to hear more pushback in some of the punitive rhetoric and highlighting of more sort of community-based solutions as well. But yes, I think how we have this conversation is really important.
Kia ora. Yeah.
What seems to be missing here are the kaumātua from the maraes that these young fellas come from. And surely it's time that the kaumātua take more responsibility for the young people that have gone astray. I mean, I too, you know, I'm a kaumātua now myself from Makatu. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've taken on that role. But why are they not here? They should be here, because these young people, the only ones that they will listen to are the their elders, the leaders of their community. And it's the same in every community and every group of people, they are leaders. There are gangs with leaders. If you want to deal with gang issues, you need to deal with their leaders because only they can take control of their people. And it's the same with every other group. And in prison, if they had dealt with the leaders in there, we could have sorted this out. It came a bit too late. And I'm wondering why the parents of these young kids are not being held accountable. That's where I came from. I didn't have a parent in my life. From the age of 7, my parents broke up. And I never got put on the right track. I still didn't, to this day. I had to put myself on that right track, and it took a long, long time after 30 years in solitary confinement. And I just fear for these young people, their future, because if they come out like we did in D-Block, it's not going to be a good story for the community, because we came out bad, we came out dangerous, and we keep coming back to jail with increasingly more serious crime. We need to speak to the leaders of these young fellas, who are the kaumātua at the marae that they belong to.
Kia ora mātua, Dean. Yeah, I think there's definitely, this is the first of many events that will be taking place, and I think you're right. I think there are thousands of different ways we could have brought people together.
So I just wanted to respond a bit to that. And Dean, thanks for the things that you've said today. It's been very helpful to hear your perspective. I guess one of the, perhaps one of the things that Karina was alluding to was how we educate the public. And one of the issues I have is that we hear a lot about, well, you know, these are bad parents, or that, you know, that they're neglecting their role. The kids that I see, they become the parents of the future, and these are, you know, where we're experiencing children that have been in situations where they've experienced abuse. Often their parents have experienced the same abuse, and their parents have experienced the same abuse. As a kind of cyclical nature. But I think there's something very important in what both of you were saying, which is about how we educate the public and how we get the message out there. The public are not stupid. You know, we need to, you know, recognise that actually their level of intellect is higher than sometimes the media portrays. So I think there's opportunity there to start presenting them with some of the science, start presenting them with some of the developmental theory that we know about children and how their brains develop, and helping them understand and get that nuanced picture. Thank you for your comments.
Kia ora. Okay, this is sort of related. It says, how is it possible to uphold te tiriti rights of mokopuna Māori within an imposed colonial system? And this is related to that as well. What does equity for Māori look like in youth justice?
I think it's a by Māori, for Māori approach at every stage, every interaction, a complete revolutionising of the system. We cannot hope to have any kind of transformative outcome by tinkering at the edges of what is effectively the same thing. We need to completely revolutionise how we think about preventative justice, restorative justice, rehabilitation for the by Māori, for Māori, holder approach.
Just tautoko that, first of all, Karina. And I guess I'd just add by saying that we have to look at the things that are already working here in Aotearoa New Zealand. And what we see, anyway, in the work that we do when we look around the motu, is that there are already some fantastic examples actually happening out there in communities in Hapori. We need to work on expanding those, scaling those, making sure that actually those stories are shared so that they can spark inspiration for other communities in Hapori. And of course, some of this also comes down to investment, a flow of funding from government to enable this mahi to be happening in communities in Hapori. And then I guess the second thing that I want to say is that when it comes to equitable outcomes, actually we need to be looking at the root cause drivers, the underlying social determinants here. We need to be committing to investing in and actually making practical change when it comes to the things that determine the outcomes of mokopuna lives. I'm talking about equitable housing, equitable access to mental health and wellbeing support, equitable incomes that actually enable households and whānau to thrive and to flourish so that our mokopuna can be nurtured. That's what equity looks like here in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Kia ora. This is the last question I'll ask you before we'll move to the speed round where you can each speak. How can we help to advance this mahi ahead of this year's election as a community? Nice easy one to end on.
Yeah, I think part of it is pushing into the kōrero with our community, with our neighbours, with our friends. And, you know, I'm assuming that a lot of people here are the converted. You know, you're here because you believe that, you know, a different conversation needs to happen. And, you know, we're often surrounded by people in our whānau that maybe don't have the education or view or worldview that we have. And we're kind of living in this space where things are becoming so much more binary, like you belong to this camp or that camp. And then we stop talking to each other because we're afraid to reach into that space, and we lose these opportunities to actually educate or connect on some shared values. And one of the things that I've found is that as I've engaged with people across shared values of justice and love and solidarity, is actually they don't wear a political colour. You know, at the end of the day, we're all human, and actually everyone that I meet, regardless of how they vote, cares about wanting to have thriving, connected communities, and actually cares about the children that we're talking about when we can demystify it and get rid of it. And so I think potentially the most powerful thing we can do walking out of this room tonight is committing to having really productive, honest conversations with the people we love about what is actually happening in our communities and what we can all be a part of and how we can all be a part of changing things.
Kia ora.
I just wanted to add to that the power of rising above those binary narratives, of recognising the fear-based or anger-based narratives that are being fed to us, and remembering just what you've said, Erin, that actually we share common goals, we share common values, and that there is a way that we can work together through education, through awareness, through honest and courageous conversations, where we work together towards evidence-led justice policy. Transformative justice is a shared horizon that we all want to get to, provided we find a way to work together to get there. The longer we argue with each other, the longer we just stand on the shoreline.
Kia ora. I might put you into your speed round now, where you each can speak for 1 to 2 minutes about whatever it is that you want the audience to take away, or anything you think they may not know. Does anyone feel a particular calling to start? All right, we might start it closest to me.
Great. Yeah, I mean, look, I think we've talked a bit about some of the things that I really was keen to get across. I think if all of you can leave the room tonight and just really be mindful of labelling and be mindful that our rangatahi are growing up in environments where they're taking cues from what they're being told about who they are, that goes a long way. I think just going back to the last question, if I may, briefly, in terms of what we can do, I think one of the most enjoyable bits of my mahi is connecting with different agencies, especially like-minded agencies. That does make my life easier. But so I think there's a piece of mahi still to be done in terms of connecting us all. Health is notoriously bad at connecting with anybody, but we are there. We're very busy, but we're really keen to be involved, and we just don't know how to do the networking quite as well. So again, I've met quite a few of the colleagues in this room this evening through just that process, that organic kind of connection. So yeah, I feel hopeful, optimistic. We've got a room full of very bright young people and some bright older people, may I say. So it's great to see this this interest and this passion for an area which has been a lifelong passion for me as well. So yeah, keep up the good mahi.
Kia ora.
I'd like to leave you with 3 whakaaro this evening. The first is that our approach to issues of youth justice and actually youth well-being, mokopuna well-being in general, they must be grounded in and consistent with the obligations and the duties that Aotearoa New Zealand has signed up to and committed to, and that means full implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, fulfilling the promise of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and also taking a strong view to the national and international evidence around what works, and building on the fact that every mokopuna has inherent mana and strengths. The second whakaaro is that when it comes to this kaupapa, we must be focusing more on prevention and early intervention. All the evidence points us towards that. It's irrefutable at this point. We have to work on that. Alongside that, when youth crime does occur, we need to ensure that we are upholding children's rights within that context, and also working on the basis of restorative approaches that heal, both in the here and now and also intergenerationally. And then my final whakaaro really comes back to what we talk about at Mana Mokopuna, and we say, kia kuru ponamu te mokopuna. Every single child having the chance to live their best lives. And that means that they can thrive, that they can flourish, and that is within an atmosphere of love, understanding, belonging, and whakapapa. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here just thinking about so many of the rangatahi that I know and love, and who have made amazing changes in their lives as they've journeyed through a system which has caused incredible harm to them. I think of what the rangatira at Voice Whakaranga Mai often talk about. The system we call a system was their childhood. It was their whānau, it was their reality. And I think about the systems that we continue to create which cause harm and perpetuate harm. Right now, we're in the midst of a discourse that is trying to sell us on both sides some real easy silver bullet solutions, but there's no soundbite solution for this problem. There are some really big, complex issues in this country which we are ignoring and which we are not adequately addressing. Issues around, poverty and inequality, houselessness, trauma, lack of support for young people with neurodiversity. And until we start to have that conversation around what true equality looks like, what true justice looks like for these communities and for our whānau, and its connection to colonisation and how that all works, we're not going to have these thriving communities we hope for. So, I think if you can leave from this corridor to, and we're, heading into this election, I guess just encourage you to look past those silver bullets, look past those quick solutions, and start asking some really critical questions around what do we actually need to do as a society and as a community to create the sort of change that we want to see in the world. And to that, the second point being that it's not just here in Wellington where that change happens. That change happens in our communities every day. It happens as we, as people, organise and connect and start to build communities that can really hold and heal and support our young people and our community. And that's where I'm seeing the change happening. It's not happening through legislation. It's not happening through, politicians or leaders. It's happening through communities who are saying, look, I care about these young people, and we're going to do what we can as a community, as a whānau, to care for and love our rangatei. So change is possible, and it's happening every single day, and we get to be a part of it.
Honestly, my encouragement would just be, as you continue to unlearn and learn things, take it easy on yourself, because it always starts from you. So continue to volunteer your time, but also take it easy on yourself too, because you're needed as well. And you're significant on this fight as well, because we've got a long way to go. But I am encouraged in my heart knowing that there's a room full of people that have a heart for our rangatahi. So continue to run your race and lean on community, because two is better than one, as we are. And yeah, the marathon continues. That's me.
Kia ora.
The key message that's coming to me now is one of unity. And I guess it's an encouragement to rise above these narratives that divide us and find ways to connect, find ways to follow evidence towards transformative change for our young people, and to ultimately listen to young people, to be encouraged and inspired by their generosity and their bravery, and to put their lived experience into innovative application that will transform the system, if not for them, for generations to come.
Kia ora, nā mihi kia koutou I tō mātauranga I tēnei pō. Before you run off, we've got a takoha for you, so please don't run off yet. Could we all please give a round of applause for our incredible panellists?